Is this really happening? I think it is. I think it's our turn. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today, previewing Packers versus 49ers. I got all the injury updates for you, the numbers, everything. We're going to go through the whole thing detailing this matchup. At the top, though, do want to say that these are two incredibly similar teams. Both teams very, very high-powered offense. Almost no matter what numbers you want to turn to, we're looking like top 5, top 10 style offenses. Similar problems in amongst them too, both really struggling in the red zone. Even defensively, they're relatively close to each other in what kind of yardage they're giving up, turnovers, penalties, etc. Two very, very similar teams. Where they do differ, though, happens, of course, to be in their records, but then also how they've gotten to those records and also some of the context around those similar numbers that they have. Also, I will say, too, these seem to be two teams that are perhaps trending into different directions. Not that the Niners are completely imploding or anything to that effect, but as we're going to see with the injury report, there's some stuff going on there. Packers, yeah, it's not great there either, but the Packers have shown some semblance of actually putting it together as of recent. So let's dive into that injury report. Understand, please, that a lot of this info is very, very evolving. You are dealing with two teams that both engage in quite a bit, as Brian Gutekunst calls it, subterfuge. Two teams that are always not the most forthcoming when it comes to injury details. And I am basing this, given my record time, on what happened Thursday. So it's the graphic I'm going to show you here. That's what happened Thursday. But also some breaking news about today. So ultimately, for the Packers, that long list of names that you see there, whether you can make it out or not, really we only got to worry about two guys. One, Edgerrin Cooper. Matt LaFleur confirmed in his press conference today, Edgerrin Cooper is not going to play. When talking about next week, it's short turnaround for the Packers. Got to get ready for the Dolphins on Thursday. There's still concern for Cooper on Thursday with that pulled hamstring. So we'll have to see. He might be missing the next 2 games for sure. He's out for 1. And then Jair Alexander. As it turns out, that pesky little knee injury that we didn't really know anything about, he broke to Matt Schneidman of The Athletic that it's actually a torn PCL that he then aggravated in his 10 snaps against the Bears last week. We just can't have our number one corner on the field, can we? So Jair, he kind of made it sound as though it's not going to be a super long time. He should be back soon, but it's not going to be this week. When asked at his press conference about if Jair could be expected to go on IR because of this injury, Matt LaFleur made it really sound like, no, that's not something the Packers are considering, which should bode well as well. Really, in the grand scheme of things, when breaking down the Packers' injuries here, can you, outside of Xavier McKinney, really, can you think of 2 other defenders on the team that you really want to have present against the Niners that really could impact this game? One being your number 1 corner to actually shut down the boundary. And then number 2 being your hyper-athletic young linebacker who's shown the ability to actually disrupt and stop the run. Yeah, not too many guys come to the front. These are 2 massive losses for the defense against what is still a good San Francisco team. Now, going on to, the other thing here, with Cooper being out, let's look at it this way. Quay, who was already probably going to play all the snaps anyway, now Quay Walker is almost a certainty to play every single defensive snap. And going against the Niners, where they use so much misdirection and linebackers have to read the offense in order to go against them well, it's just not a great matchup for Quay Walker, and we're probably going to see it every single snap. Now, as for the Niners, there's really a big 3 here that we need to discuss. 1, Nick Bosa. He's been dealing with a couple injuries, suffered another one against Seattle last week. Diving into all of the San Francisco reporting, it really seems like they are the most pessimistic about Bosa. Hasn't practiced all week. It really sounds, they compared him to other injuries that have missed weeks. Really sounds like this is a guy who isn't going to go this week. Strong pessimism with Nick Bosa. But then another one, Trent Williams, their starting left tackle. Now, he's a guy who does not need to practice at all. in order to play. He's one of the best tackles in the league. He's been one of the best tackles in the league for like a decade. He doesn't need to practice. Well, GM John Lynch said that with some injuries, like last week, Williams didn't play, played against Seattle. With some injuries as a player, you go into a game as a game time decision, and you come out of the game going like, oh, that actually kind of helped loosen it up, like things are feeling well. Lynch acknowledged that Trent Williams did the opposite of that. Seemed to come out of the Seattle game last week a little bit worse than he went into that game. So, like many of the Packers star players, the 49ers have said, we're going to give Trent Williams every available minute to prove that he can go. He was a game time decision at worst. We know as of Friday, breaking news, he's not practicing today. He still seems questionable. Like he seems to me, just reading between the lines here, seems to be a truly questionable call for the 49ers. And then that takes us to the last one, the big one, quarterback Brock Purdy. Matt LaFleur on Wednesday said that he's confident Purdy will play. And I'll kind of believe it when I see it that he doesn't actually go, because there could be some strong subterfuge here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he didn't really throw at Wednesday's practice. He was limited, didn't really throw. Started to throw yesterday at Thursday's practice, then left practice early, went to rehab, got an MRI, which I'll talk about in just a second. And now, breaking as of just right before I hit record, he's not seen on the practice field to start the open portion of Friday practice for the media. When asked just this morning about the star quarterback, GM John Lynch said this: we'll see where he's at today, he told KNBR Radio in San Francisco. Hopefully he makes progress and we have a shot at this weekend, but we'll see. I think it's tenuous. Then as Bill Huber for Sports Illustrated said, the 49ers were concerned enough to give Purdy an MRI. And Lynch goes on to say, we feel good about where it's at from that standpoint, but still you have to be able to go out and operate. Brock's going to show up here today, and we'll see where he can go in terms of practice, and we'll make some decisions accordingly. Bearing in mind, he's not on the field to start practice. So here's the deal. The 49ers are like the Packers. They're like the Patriots. They play their detail very, very close to the chest. I know fantasy players and gamblers were very, very unhappy with the 49ers in week 1, given the Christian McCaffrey situation. But this is not an isolated incident. The Niners have been doing this for years when it comes to exaggerating, not saying things with injuries. So it's really hard to know here. But if I were to break this down, it seems like Bosa is like a no-go. Everyone seems very pessimistic about Bosa. Trent Williams seems like a true maybe. And he's not practicing again today. Doesn't need to, but still, it's noteworthy. He seems like a true maybe. And Purdy, man, it's just on Wednesday, I was right where LaFleur was. Like, I got plays fine. But as the week has gone on, and to not fully practice yesterday, now to be out there for the opening of today, we might truly be looking at Brandon Allen at quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And this is in addition to Trey Greenlaw being out, starting safety Funga on IR, Brandon Ayuk on IR. Plus, it's entirely possible that they're even going to be missing out on Givens, their depth defensive tackle, counting a depth wide receiver. They might miss out on Bethune, a depth linebacker. All of those guys haven't practiced yet this week either. So, the depth is being tested for the 49ers, and now it's starting to hit their star players too. They are a very, very ridiculously banged up team at this point. So overall for this matchup, they're still the 49ers. They're a very good football team. But the cracks in the foundation are maybe beginning to show a little bit more than any other matchup for Packers-Niners thus far. So who are the 49ers? Let's get to that. And let's take a look at their depth chart. Yep, Brock Purdy, quarterback, maybe. If he isn't able to go, the consensus seems to be from the San Francisco media that it will be Brandon Allen in their quarterback. Yes, that Joshua Dobbs right there, that is the Dobbs who started from Minnesota last year. Like, he kind of just started everywhere last year. Well, it's him, but it really looks as though it's going to be Brandon Allen. Matt LaFleur does know Brandon Allen from their time together in LA. He said that in his press conference today. Allen's now been in the league a long time. Allen does have a relatively high turnover rate for a backup quarterback, which has Xavier McKinney licking his chops. But anyway, the other thing is LaFleur said, even if it's Allen in, expect the offense to still be run the same. He didn't say this, but I will. Less good. Then at running back, you got Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, who did an excellent job filling in for McCaffrey. Wide receivers, Juwan Jennings, their leading receiver. Then, of course, they still have Debo, Ricky Pearsall, the first-round rookie there as a boundary. Then you got Kittle, who's coming back this week. Yuchuk, the fullback. Trent Williams seems like that true questionable that I was talking about. And then the rest of the offensive line. Jake Brendel and starting center. And right tackle Colton McKivitz. If you're looking for where the Packers can exploit in their pass rush, it's those two. Those two have below average metrics in terms of pass blocking. Dominic Pooney, stuck in the middle of them, someone who believed the Packers would have loved in the draft process, right? Well, it turns out he's one of the better guards in football as a rookie. He is their starting right guard, and he has had some great numbers. Oh, got to get back. Don't show me Pooney. That was a misclick. There we go. He's had great numbers as a rookie for them, and he's kind of been their stalwart in between these two individuals who've been struggling in some pass pro. Then taking a look at their defense, this is not the 49er defense as we recall from past years. Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott in there at defensive tackle. Bosa, if he misses, that means that we're going to see some like Gross Matos and Robert Beal Jr. here. Those are not Nick Bosa. That's a big fall off. Then Leonard Floyd, who's been the beneficiary of having Nick Bosa on the other side. And yes, that is former Packer Devondre Campbell there at linebacker. And Fred Warner. If you're looking for guys that are going to be on the field more often than not, it's these two. And then going to the secondary, Jair Brown, Isaac Yiadom, another former Packer, has been starting at boundary corner all year for the Niners and actually doing a pretty okay job. But their true number one corner is Charvarius Ward. And if you're wondering about Ward's injury status, he's going to be fine in spite of being limited at practice this week. Then another former Packer, Pat O'Nominal, is their punter, and Jake Moody, of course, is their kicker. So, who are the 49ers? They're 5-5. They've got losses against the Vikings, Rams, Cardinals, Chiefs, and Seahawks, wins against the Jets, Patriots, Seahawks, Cowboys, and Buccaneers. And what's really interesting about that 5-5 record, there's no real stark trend here. They're mediocre at home, they're mediocre on the road, their splits are fairly conventional, but there are two little nuggets that I notice when going through all of their games. In their 10 games, 7 of them have been decided by 10 points or less. They are 2-5 in those 7. For the other 3, all double-digit wins. They cruise to victory. For the most part, though, they don't get blown out, their biggest loss being a 10-point loss to the Chiefs. But the other thing, and I know this is super high-level analysis, they lose to good teams. They win against bad teams. So I'm just going to roll off the names here. The losses have come against the Vikings, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Chiefs, and the Seahawks. Also notice that every team in their division has beaten them at least once. But ultimately here, Seahawks, they're 5-5. All right. Cardinals leading the West at 6-4. The Rams, they're right around 500. The Chiefs, one of the best teams in football, of course, and the Vikings doing what the Vikings are doing. Their wins, Jets, terrible. Patriots, terrible. Yeah, they got the Seahawks in the rematch, or the Seahawks actually beat them in the rematch, I should say. Cowboys, been pretty terrible. And Buccaneers, maybe the best team on this list, sitting at 4-6. Every single time they've gone up against a team with a better than 500 record, they've lost. So, where do the 49ers rank now? Over their last 3 weeks, because I just want to worry about modern trends, especially with McCaffrey coming back and things like that. It plays more into part for the Niners than other teams. So, over their last 3, defensively, they're the 6th best team in terms of defending the run, 86.7 yards per game against them. In terms of attempts, 6th fewest attempts against them. So teams aren't even really trying to run on the Niners that much, and it's corresponding. In terms of passing, though, they're giving up 178.7 yards per game through the air, 4th best in the NFL. In terms of attempts, teams are still trying to throw, dead middle in attempts. As for full season defensive stats, they're giving up 22.2 points per game. That's dead middle in the NFL. But then in the red zone, they struggle in the red zone. This is going to be a theme today. 62.5%, 23rd in the NFL. Certainly one of the worst red zone defenses the Packers have gone against this year outside of Jacksonville. Last week, though, Seattle, every single time they got into the red zone, it was a touchdown, 100% last week. Offensively for the 49ers, rushing, they get 143 yards per game on the ground, 5th best in the NFL. In terms of attempts, 12th. That's really good numbers there. In terms of passing, 10th in the NFL, 243.3 yards per game, and attempts 21st. So again, even more promising in that regard. Again, that's over the last 3. Full season offensive stats, they're 8th in terms of points per game. That's tied with Green Bay, 25 points per game. Red zone percentage, 48.78%. That's good for 26th in the NFL. However, over the last 3, they're getting better. 60% over their last 3. If you're wondering where Green Bay is, Green Bay, 27th. And not trending with 60% over the last 3. Turnovers per game, the San Francisco 49ers are 11th at a positive 0.3 turnover per game. Sacks gotten, they get 2.6 sacks per game. Sacks given up, 2.1, so they're a little bit better in that way. And then penalties, they're actually, they get 6 penalties a game, good for 11th in the NFL. Interesting note, though, about the penalties. So they're 11th in the NFL at 6 penalties per game. Green Bay, nearly a full penalty per game behind them in like the mid-20s in terms of all this ranking. But in terms of penalty yardage, San Francisco averages only 1 fewer penalty yard per game. So while Green Bay gets more penalties, San Francisco penalties are more impactful. So let's talk about these matchups, right? How do you handle the 49ers offense? And I'm going to be totally frank here. So much of this is dependent on who actually plays. If Trent Williams is out there, okay, then you don't have to slide Kittle into the traditional tight end role more often to help out, right? If you're rolling out Brandon Allen at quarterback, sure, their offense may stay predominantly the same, but you know they're going to run it more, right? So I think either way, we're probably going to see them run more than they otherwise would. But these injuries, these absences, may dictate where Kittle winds up. Who winds up in the slot if Kittle can't go to the slot, etc., etc. So it is kind of a waterfall that way. But here's the thing with Christian McCaffrey, right? Because that's the thing. That's the bugaboo. Like even if they roll out backups everywhere, they still have Christian McCaffrey. Well, Christian McCaffrey still seems to be working his way back from an Achilles injury because he hasn't completely looked his old self. He's averaging 4 yards per carry under 4 yards per carry over his last 2 games. And over those 2 games, he's missed or forced only 4 missed tackles on 42 touches. 42 total touches combined for receiving and rushing. He's caused only 4 missed tackles, under where he normally is in that way. So we know this. They are going to use a ton of misdirection with McCaffrey, whether he's running well or not. We know that they're going to vary their alignments because their top 3 receivers in terms of snap count happen to be the top 3 receivers on the team in Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel. The only guy offensively who may catch a pass that you can pigeonhole into one specific spot on the field is Ricky Pearsall. That's why no matter what, a player of consequence in this game is actually going to be one of the Packers' youngest defenders in the form of Javon Bullard. Because no matter what, he's going to be lined up against George Kittle, Hall of Fame tight end, or Juwan Jennings, top 10 in PFF grading at wide receiver, 49ers leading wide receiver, Deebo Samuel, or the occasional Christian McCaffrey. No matter what, that young man is in for one of the hardest assignments on this defense, no matter who's throwing the ball. So then to look outside of personnel, we acknowledge that the Packers and 49ers are very, very similar teams. But as Maggie Loney pointed out in her 6-pack that she writes for Cheesehead TV, one area where they're very different is third down. And this could truly determine whether the Packers defense actually wins the game against the Niners offense or not. The Packers are 22nd in the league on third down offensively. 36.6% of their third downs are converted into firsts. The 49ers, 4th best, 45.4%. Part of the reason for this is their very good running team. They're very, very good on early downs. That sets them up for very favorable third downs, right? Just basic logic there. But the Packers defense has to be more successful on third down than they were against the Bears. And you're going to wind up with Bullard in the slot. Valentine is going to be filling in for Jair. And frankly, as far as I'm concerned, we know Hafley calls a wildly different game when Jair is on the field than when he's not. And it's one of those things where like Hafley is more willing to have his defensive front do the exotic stuff, send outright blitzers, etc. Hafley does all of that more when Jair is on the field. Because if Jair's not on the field, he lacks confidence in the back end, so then he doesn't send extra guys, and then that hurts the pass rush. See, it's like this big cascade of effects here. And as far as I'm concerned, Hafley needs to call this game like Jair was there. You have to trust Valentine. And if you're going to continue to trot out Nixon as a starting boundary corner, then you better trust him too. And yeah, Bullard's your slot. Time for him to shine. You got to call this game like Jair is there and still put pressure on the 49er offense, attempt to dictate what they're allowed to do, not the other way around. As for Packers offense versus the 49ers defense, 49ers, they're a very aggressive defense. They always have been. Part of the reason they're so successful year in and year out. And Fred Warner is still very, very good at roaming the middle of the field, although that's got a little crack in it too. But keep in mind, he got 2 picks on Jordan Love at the end of last year in a game that we don't need to dwell on. But per PFF grading, Fred Warner's fallen off hard. The first 5 weeks of the year, he was one of the best linebackers in football, if not the best. Over the last month, though, he's actually grading out to be like pretty below average at linebacker, especially in his coverage grades. One person who also is grading out to be incredibly below average, his partner, former Packer Devondre Campbell. Campbell is having a miserable season. He's not tackling to the rate that he was in Green Bay. And also in terms of coverage, he's been targeted 46 times through the air. He's given up 40 catches. If Nick Bosa is unable to go in this game, I would expect that the 49ers are going to have to expose or play their linebackers up a little bit, which means you're taking Fred Warner out of his greatest strength. Fred Warner is at his best when he's able to back up 8 to 15 yards and interrupt any of the crossers, slants, etc. that offenses love to run. That's when Warner's at his best. Without Nick Bosa there, they may have to pull their linebackers up, which means you're going to remove Warner from what he does best when he's already beginning to struggle, since around him is this crew of depth, right? So what I want to see from the Packers offense, and a way to combat that, is in half one, roll out Josh Jacobs a lot. Even if it doesn't always go well, roll out Josh Jacobs. Because the 49ers can be run on, especially if you're not running up the middle. Use your own misdirection and cause the 49ers to crash into their over pursuit. And I would use that then to set up Jordan Love for the second half. Part of the reason why. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this. I couldn't find audio of anyone saying it. I know I'm going to say this wrong, but per Akash Anavarathan, he's a 49er writer in San Francisco. The following is the 49ers EPA per quarter. First quarter, they are the 4th best EPA in the NFL defensively. Second, 7th best. Third, 13th. Fourth, 28th. They fall off in the fourth quarter. And there could be a couple reasons for that. One, maybe it's schematic changes with their new defensive coordinator. Maybe that's not going well. Maybe they're not adjusting at halftime well, right? Or is it because that they're so banged up that they're just losing steam and the depth is struggling to survive? And the good players that they do have left, much like we've seen Jordan Love try to do on offense for the Packers, they're just doing too much. So roll out Jacobs early and often, wear into them, make them think that you're just trying to control the game on the ground like the Niners have done to us 100 times before, and then unleash in the second half. Also, this is a game where the Packers have to start doing better in the red zone. If we're going to start seeing these signs of life offensively in the red zone, this has got to be one game where we see it. If you're wondering how they can do that, I would recommend from Acme Packing. Dusty Evilly wrote this terrific article that just dropped this morning detailing what plays have worked best against the 49ers in the red zone. Why are the 49ers struggling in the red zone? They've gone against these kinds of plays. He basically built a little 13-play package that LaFleur could just copy and go do. So, overall, I I have some hesitancy here. They're still the 49ers. Yes, they are heavily wounded. They've been heavily wounded all year. They still have 5 wins. They still are doing very, very well in terms of explosive plays in the offense. Even if they fizzle out in the red zone, we know what that's like. This is still a defense that's done enough to hang, still has them in the positive territory of turnover margin per game. And the other thing that does have me at least a little bit hesitant is the 49ers are a more physical team than the Packers and seemingly do better in Purdy, not so much, fine. But in terms of like the trenches and everywhere like that, this is a team that probably does better in crap conditions than the Packers. And we know Sunday is not going to be balmy. It's not going to be sunny. But on the flip side, the 49ers have struggled against good teams all year. While still explosive, not nearly as much as they've been in past years, especially in the red zone where they've had a complete inability to run even with McCaffrey coming back. And the run game on the whole, McCaffrey averaging 4 yards per carry is downright just blasphemous. And yet that's what he's done since he's come back. Maybe we'll see more Mason because of it, but still, it's a big weakness for the 49ers. And like I said, they struggle against good teams. Packers just happen to be a really good team. I really do think that the Packers get the 49ers at the right time this go around. Because the 49ers, not only is it all of these injuries, and we'll see just how impactful they are on Sunday, but there's some cracks forming. And maybe it's because of the injuries, whatever. But still, nonetheless, this is not the 49ers team that we've seen in past years. And the Packers, while Jair and Cooper are massive injuries, are seemingly trending in the correct direction. Jordan Love having, dare I say, his most efficient game of the year last week against Chicago. That should bode very, very well against a tired San Francisco defense. So they're showing signs of waking from their reverse hibernation that they do. That should go well for Green Bay. Ultimately, I think this goes one of two ways. Either the Packers take control in half one and then they just need to hold. Or I think it kind of goes back and forth until we get to half two. And then we see a fourth quarter showdown favoring the Packers. So Green Bay 24, San Francisco 14. Of course, on Sunday, we'll be here for a watch party. Of course, Claudia and I will be here for the whole game, hanging out with you, talking about the Packers, hopefully in better mood than much of last week was. But then, just as a reminder for you, no Thanksgiving watch party for the game against the Dolphins as we host Thanksgiving, and it's a family day. So thank you, everybody, for joining me here. Do hope you have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you on Sunday. And as always, go Pack, go.